Kevin, can you can hear me?
I certainly can, Dan. How are you? Good morning, man.
It's good to have you. Let me give you the full introduction here. 11-year career, former goalie, first black analyst in the 91 years of the NHL. And I know you've had some comments on what's going on, Black Lives Matter. And I was curious, in a sport like hockey,
Mhm.
just what it was like playing on a night in and night out basis of what kind of racism that you ran into.
Yeah, Dan. I think for the listeners and the viewers, more importantly, hope everybody's safe. Just to start off there and healthy. Of course, our deepest condolences to George Floyd family and others. Um, but in saying that, from my own experience, it was unique because my parents came from beautiful Barbados in the Caribbean. They emigrated to Canada. I was born in Canada, and you know what hockey means to Canadian people. And right from when I was 6, I aspired to play in the league. First grade, Miss Mahar was my teacher. The first book I wrote, I sketched the NHL logo on a scoreboard. My parents have it to this day. I had myself in goalie equipment, and I knew from then that was my life's goal, to play in the league. But along the way, playing youth hockey in Toronto for the most part at that time, everybody treated my family and my sister and I well. Once I got to junior, as opposed to playing U.S. college, once I got to junior in Canada, I started to see a little bit of a different vibe from some people because I was climbing the ranks, and that happened to be my NHL draft year. So for the most part, my teammates were great, but some opposing players would say some things like, "Hey, there's 5 brothers that are playing in this game. Why are we even doing the face-off at Sunrise? Let's have a jump ball." That type of stuff. And then in addition to
Wow.
some fans yelling racial epithets in the stands, where my parents would be there and my sister. So that was kind of my first kind of encounter with that. And then you had some odd knucklehead fans around the league, and there's so many great cities that are leagues in. But let's say Philly. Philly's an awesome sports city just down the turnpike from us here. We know that. It's a rich history. But what's weird is you'd have some people that are cheering for Iverson. AI, the answer. That's our guy. We love AI. We love Elton Brand. And then the next night I'm playing against the Flyers, and then some people will be yelling racial epithets. So that was part of the challenge. But ultimately, Dan, those things are hurtful. They show a lack of class on behalf of the people that do that. But for me, it was about setting my own story, living my dream, taking care of my family, playing in the best league in the world, and being one of 60 goalies on planet Earth at any given time, and sometimes one of one, and being the only black one on planet Earth. So I lived my dream as a player, and I'm doing it now as a broadcaster.
Did you ever tell management?
Yeah, there were certain instances where I played for some great managers. I think all told, there's probably 15 Stanley Cup rings between 4 of the general managers I was privileged to play for, and they're not only Hall of Famers, they're great people. So I've had some really great conversations with Glenn Sather, who was the architect of the Oilers during their reign with Gretzky in the 80s. Also great Lou Lamoriello, who ran the Devils here, who I played for, who's now running the Islanders. Just to name a few. Commissioner Bettman has always been very supportive. I had a great conversation with him this morning. Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly. Some of the coaches I played for have been excellent. Paul Maurice, John Torchetti, some other ones. But some of them were really great around that, especially the aforementioned. They were very helpful, and they respected me not only as a player, but also as a person. They respected my family, and that meant a lot to me, still does to this day.
But when you see bananas thrown on the ice,
Yeah,
Kevin,
had that happen.
I mean, we see this in soccer. It's still going on.
Yeah.
But you're there, and how do you react to something like that or not react to something like that?
You know what? That's the thing. That's a great question. I'm going to tell you why. As basic as the question sounds, Dan, you capture the essence perfectly, because we were playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs against Montreal in 2002. I was with the Carolina Hurricanes, and we're in the Eastern Conference quarterfinal. And you know the history of the Montreal Canadiens. That is the New York Yankees in terms of wins and prestige. That is Manchester United. And there's just something unique about playing in Montreal as there would be in playing Madison Square Garden here in New York. But we lost that game. I was in the net. We lost the game 2-1 in overtime. And after the game, there was a banana that rained down that a fan had thrown at me. Now, here's what's crazy about this now. It's 2002, the most prestigious franchise in the league. I have family that lives in Montreal, and this happens in Montreal. So, and we lost the game, by the way. Let's just add that to it. So we get in the locker room. I'm a little bit upset about it, of course. I just think it's the ultimate human disrespect. And fortunately, our PR guy at the time, who's still there with the Carolina Hurricanes now, Mike Sunheim, I mentioned Jim Rutherford, who was our then GM, who was the GM of Pittsburgh, and Paul Maurice, who was our coach, who coaches Winnipeg. They couldn't have been any nicer, and my teammates couldn't have been any more supportive. Now, the other part of your question is, how did I react? I reacted. I was very patient. I was very diplomatic. I was pointed, but I was very diplomatic in how I answered that and how I responded to it. And here's the challenge that I found with that, and a lot of athletes will tell you this, and a lot of people will tell you this too, is the perpetrator, often they do the act. Then number two, they want to govern how you do or don't respond, if you can or can't respond. 3 and 4, if they choose to like your response or not. So that's kind of unfair. It should never happen in the first place. I think that's the lowest form of class. And you nailed it. You talked about soccer, and I love soccer. I love all sports. I have friends in every league around the world. I've been to Serie A games in Italy twice, but I think the biggest challenge, and I've seen MLS games here in North America, but I think the biggest challenge is all the governing bodies have to have a zero tolerance policy for fans, employees, and players. And it has to be a safe place for everybody in the venue, in every sporting venue around the world.
Talking to Kevin Weeks, he's a former NHL goalie, spent 11 years in the league, now working for the NHL Network, their lead analyst. Your thoughts on Bubba Wallace? And I don't know if there's parallels, and I don't want to make that leap, but I'm curious if you see parallels. I don't want to tell you or ask you if you see it, or tell you if you do. Do you see any parallels with what Bubba Wallace is doing in NASCAR?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just based on the demographics of NASCAR, and I lived in the Southeast for a good part of my career. I played in Miami. I played in Tampa. I played in Greensboro, North Carolina when I was in the minors. And as I just mentioned, I played in Raleigh for the Carolina Hurricanes in the league. So I know the history of NASCAR. I know how passionate the fan base is and how passionate the fan base has been. Keep in mind, Brad Daugherty, as you know, had been a voice of NASCAR for years, long after his days in the NBA and his days of being a Tar Heel, playing at UNC. But I would say this, I certainly understand what he's going through. I do. I understand it's an isolating feeling at times, and he's living his dream. He aspired to be a NASCAR driver. He's become one. He's one of the best in the world at his craft. But here's another thing that I do see too. I do see some of his competitors and fellow racers stepping up. And some of them have stepped up in support of him, which is great to see. We do have a lot of people of color that do like NASCAR and quote unquote non-traditional fans. Like we would have quote unquote non-traditional fans for the NHL as well. But it's a tough road. When you're one of one at times, it can be a very, very tough road. But I applaud him for what he's doing. I applaud him for having that courage. I applaud some of his fellow drivers for also stepping behind him. And here's the thing, Dan, you've had so much success in your career. You've been around as long as you have. I always say that sports should be connective tissue. And sports can and typically is, when we're at our best, is transcendent. There's very few things in the world that can transcend like sports. Music, art, culture, food. But at the heart of all that is people. It's people 101. So whether you're from Murfreesboro, whether you're from Greensboro, if you're from Talladega, if you're from Tallahassee, that doesn't make you any more supreme or any less than anybody else. Everybody should be made to feel safe and welcome.
Colin Kaepernick, I don't know if he wants to play. Mm-hmm. And then now you have people who are spokespersons who are saying, hey, we should give him a chance now. Well, nothing's changed with Colin Kaepernick other than the times are changing. I'm wondering about, it feels like tokenism to me, Kevin, that nobody wanted him. Now let's bring him back. And like, why not last year or the year before? Your thoughts on Kaepernick? What does he have to lose if he comes back, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I think, and you know this too, again, just based on your experience, I think anytime you're doing something that's unique or that hasn't been done before, and even if it is positive in its spirit, it's not always met with the most appreciation. Look at the great Jordan, MJ. I'm an MJ guy to the bone. Unfortunately, I've had a chance to meet him and play in some of his golf events, but they banned his sneakers. Like, think about that. They banned the Air Jordan when it first came out. And I'm not trying to trivialize this around a sneaker, but the sneaker was so transcendent, and so was he. And then that transcended the sport. Think of the different people from various backgrounds that grew up loving the sport because of him. So if you look at a guy like Colin Kaepernick, it was seen as being rogue. Some people saw it as being extreme. It wasn't well received by a lot of people. And quite frankly, clearly, with time, sometimes time has a way of reframing the way in which we see and feel about things. And I think that's kind of the case where he's concerned from a perception standpoint, because the atmosphere right now is such that we see what's happened. And maybe more people are more attuned and in tune to what's happening based on coronavirus. They're able to process the information. From the people I've spoken to, Dan, Weeksy, this is crazy. Weeksy, we never knew this was happening. Weeksy, I played with you. I never knew it was to this extent. Wow, I'm so sorry. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
So for Cap now, I think the biggest thing for him, and you asked it off the top, does he want to play? If he genuinely wants to play, well, then I always maintain there should be an opportunity for him to play, because not every single NFL quarterback on a roster is better than him right now. And I think a lot of that lies with whether or not he wants to play. And then from the owner's standpoint, just to continue to be open-minded and know that if and when he's a fit for a specific team and he can come and make your team better, then why not? I don't look at it as a tokenism. I just look at it as an opportunity for people to reframe maybe what they thought before. And that's not unique to the owners. We've all had to do that.
How much pressure do you think you'd be under if you were playing now to take a knee during the anthem?
I think you'd be, if it were me specifically in hockey, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there'd be tons, for sure. I think there'd be tons, but I also think that there would be less than there would have been 6 months ago for the same reason. Given the pandemic, people have more capacity to be more empathetic, more compassionate. They're not necessarily commuting. A lot of people are working remotely from home. And I just feel like the human capacity seems to have expanded some. And it needs to expand a lot more, quite frankly. But I can tell you, Dan, there's so many NHL people, players, coaches, agents, owners. I just had a great conversation with Commissioner Bettman this morning. But so many different people and fans that I've never met before that are sending messages of support.
Yeah, I just wonder in that sport.
Goes a long way.
Yeah, I wonder that sport though, Kev. If you took a knee, I don't know if an African American.
Less so now, tons, but less so now than 6 months ago, for sure. For that very reason.
Yeah.
For that very reason.
It's great to have you on. I appreciate.
Thank you so much. Been a long-time fan. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. We appreciate your time. Good luck. That's Kevin Weeks, former NHL goalie, NHL lead analyst there.